Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a real-world project management crisis to see exactly what happens when theory smacks right into reality and, well, everything goes wrong. Let's get into it.
As a project manager, that signed contract is the moment you live for. The budget's approved, the execs are happy, it feels like you've crossed the finish line. But as we're about to see, that's often just the start of the real fight. Okay, picture this. It's 11:30 at night. Your team on the other side of the world is all geared up for a critical knowledge transfer that's happening in just a few hours. And then, this email drops into your inbox. This isn't just a speed bump. This is a solid brick wall, and it's where our story really begins. So, let's meet the main characters in this high-stakes standoff. Understanding who they are and what they control is pretty much the first step to untangling any mess like this. So, here's the fundamental conflict. On one side, you've got your executive, Tim John, who's wielding the power of a legally signed contract. But on the other side, you have Rob Miller, the infrastructure owner, who holds the keys to the kingdom. He has the power of the process. And our project lead, Kapil, is caught smack in the middle, just trying to get what he needs from the vendor, Daniel. It is a classic power versus process showdown. So why isn't that signed piece of paper enough to get the wheels turning? Well, this brings us to a really important practical document that, honestly, often gets lost in the shuffle when executives just want to get things done. You see, while the big, high-level project charter is for the sponsors, the project initiation note, or PIN, that's for the people in the trenches. It's the how-to manual for the technical teams. And here's the kicker. Kapul's team had already sent a PIN with all the right paperwork, including the very risk assessment that Rob was so worried about. But Rob, he never even opened the attachment. A tiny, simple human error that set this whole firestorm in motion. So they get on this emergency call the next morning. Now, Kapil could have easily thrown Rob under the bus in front of his vice president, just by pointing out the unread email. But that would have won the battle and totally lost the war. Instead, he used a conflict management technique called smoothing. He didn't focus on who was to blame. He focused on their shared goal, getting access, and he gave Rob a way to save face. It was an absolutely brilliant tactical move. All right, so a very tense truce is called. Kapil's team in India gets this conditional read-only access to the servers. The night shift can finally start their knowledge transfer. So the team is finally in the system. They're on a call with the folks in Budapest. They're walking through configurations. Everything seems like it's finally back on track. But then the screen share just freezes. The connection drops. And there's just silence. An alert just screams across the monitor. The entire portal for QT Money has just vanished. Now, this is not some small glitch. This is a priority one, a P1 critical outage. For a financial services company, this means thousands and thousands of dollars are being lost every single minute. The pressure is just immense. And in this moment of just extreme pressure, the junior night shift lead, a guy named Deepak, he doesn't panic. He doesn't freeze up. He immediately turns to his playbook. Because in a real crisis, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training and your processes. And this document, this is the team's lifeline. An escalation matrix isn't just a fancy contact list. It's a pre-agreed set of rules for managing chaos. It tells Deepak exactly who to call, in what order, and what to say. It removes all the fear and the guesswork, and it empowers him to take decisive action, even if that means going over Rob's head. Now, what's really, really interesting here is the crystal clear distinction of roles, which comes from a framework like a Rossi chart. For a P1 outage, Daniel, the vendor, he is the action taker. He's the one responsible for the fix. Rob is the informed party. He has to be notified, but he's not the one who does the work. Having this clarity predefined is absolutely everything in a crisis. So, following that playbook gets everyone on a 2 a.m. emergency bridge call. And as you can probably imagine, tensions are through the roof, and the blame game starts right away. Rob immediately points the finger at the new team from India. I mean, from his point of view, it makes sense, right? They were the only new thing that changed. He gave them access, and then boom, the system crashed. It seems logical, but the investigation quickly brings the real truth to light. So it turns out the outage had absolutely nothing to do with what the offshore team did. The system's security protocol saw their connection, didn't recognize it, and thought it was an attack. Why? Because their IP addresses were never added to the safe list. This was a configuration mistake, an oversight by the on-site team. And this right here, this perfectly illustrates a core PMP concept, the difference between being responsible and being accountable. Daniel, down in Mexico, was responsible for doing the specific task. But Rob in New Jersey, he was accountable for the overall outcome, making sure the whole environment was stable and ready to go. Remember this, responsibility can be delegated, but accountability cannot. The buck stopped with Rob.
This whole baptism by fire really teaches us some powerful lessons. First, that practical document, the PIN, is your best friend for getting tech teams on the same page. Second, an escalation matrix is your lifeline when things go sideways. And finally, knowing who is truly accountable versus who is just responsible is absolutely critical. Project management isn't about having a perfect plan, it's about having these frameworks ready for when that plan inevitably breaks.
Because as we've seen today, just having the documents isn't enough. The real test is whether your team trusts them and each other when the alarms are blaring. Because it's not a matter of if a crisis will happen, it's a matter of when. Thanks for digging into this with me.